You've had Wendy's Nugs dipped in sauce, but have you had them covered in sauce? Wendy's new Saucy Nugs take the crispy and spicy nugs you love and turn them up to 11. Choose between flavors like buffalo, honey barbecue, garlic parm, and of course the hot versions of all three of those, which I highly recommend. Or if you're a real heat seeker, try the spicy ghost pepper. I dare you. Only at Wendy's. That is 7 delicious ways to try the nugs you already love. Pick a flavor, grab some napkins, and prepare to nug like you have never nugged before. For a whole new way to nug, it's got to be Wendy's at participating U.S. Wendy's. Welcome to Andy and Ari on 3. It is the day we find out the results of the vote of the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. At least the first one. That doesn't actually mean anything because the last one's the only one that means anything. But at least it gives us a window into what these folks are thinking, Ari.
It's a huge day for our country, Andy. Huge day.
It is.
We've been waiting.
Where will BYU land?
We've been waiting a whole 1 year for this. It's going to be an exciting time. I can't wait to see how much attention we have on our live show today during the reveal of the votes. But you know what? Hey,
There's
here.
Nothing else anyone could be watching, Ari, and that's we should tell everybody. Come join us 7 p.m. Eastern time tonight, Tuesday night, November 5th, because there's nothing else that you're going to want to watch or care about. Come join us 7 p.m. Eastern time. We will be live as the playoff rankings are revealed. You could watch the show on ESPN, I suppose, but wouldn't you rather hang out with us? Just put that on with the sound off.
Yeah.
We're funnier. I promise. We'll be much funnier.
And probably more realistic, too, to be honest. Like, we're not going to just sugarcoat everything. We're going to tell you what we feel, what the truth is. And, I think that we have a lot to learn today. And truthfully speaking, Andy, like, this is the first time that you and I are going to be going through this, too. Kind of trying to figure out what is this going to look like. We're going to have to walk ourselves as much as the people through, not getting fooled by, the rankings in terms of what the seating is going to look like. There's a lot of new frontier here that we have to cover, and it's going to be a new foundation of the sport and the country. So I'm excited for tonight. And what else could you possibly care about?
There's nothing else you could possibly be watching. Certainly nothing else that involves the entire country and whether certain states pop and certain ones don't.
Realistically speaking, though,
just watch us.
If we're live at 6 Central, 7 Eastern time, we've got plenty of time.
Have closed in every state by that point.
We've got plenty of time to catch up on the other stuff. So this is important stuff. And, I know that people are on edge. I know that, truthfully speaking, Andy, it's an emotional time in our country. People are certainly, keyed up for this one way or the other. And hopefully the one thing that, Andy and I can promise you is that we're a nice little escape from the real issues that we are facing in our country, regardless of who wins tonight. So super excited to be here with you tonight. And there's no better way I'd rather spend my election Tuesday. So let's get into it.
Let's do it. So we're going to have 10 questions for the committee. But first, we got to talk about a little bit of news because DJ Lagway might play on Saturday, Billy Napier said. Like, that is, he got taken off on a cart in the Georgia game. But if DJ Lagway can play Saturday, I think that makes a difference. And I don't know if DJ Lagway is going to play against Texas on Saturday, but the way Billy Napier was talking makes me think DJ Lagway might play against LSU next week, which whether he plays on Saturday or is not able to play till next week, either way, I think it reshapes the conversation around Billy Napier. So here's what he said. He said, the good news, we've had some positive information on that front. That's the positive thing. We do think the injury is less significant. We think there's a pathway for recovery and return. Later, he said, we've not completely ruled him out. And he's talking about for Saturday against Texas. And I think a lot of that will be determined as we move our way through the week. So that's a good thing for all involved and certainly for DJ. It's going to be pretty clear cut once we get to Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So we'll know. So I would watch that SEC availability report on Wednesday. Let's see where they put him. They might rule him out, or they might have him as doubtful, or who knows, questionable or probable. We'll see. But I think that's certainly something to pay attention to, because it does reframe the Billy Napier question if he can play, right? Ari, I mean, we thought if it's QB3 going against this murderer's row that they have these next 3 weeks, that it's probably going to look pretty bad, even if the defense is playing well.
Okay, so I had a weird thought last night. I was thinking about this.
Go for it.
And I knew I was going to save it for the show, and I'm excited. But let me preface it by saying that there's no question that it's great for DJ, right? Like, we are always wanting any player who gets injured to come back as healthy and be back to themselves as quickly as possible.
Correct.
You do not root for injuries in any stretch of the imagination, because the human element's more important than the game. That said, for the optics standpoint, when it comes to Billy Napier's job, if DJ is unable to play against Texas and against some of the other big time teams that this team is playing, and Florida loses or even gets blown out, but plays respectfully with their third stringer, optically speaking, is that more acceptable from people who will ultimately decide Billy Napier's fate than having DJ playing and also losing or getting their butt kicked? Like, what
I think getting smoked repeatedly gets him fired, regardless of how that happens.
Okay.
If it happens with DJ playing, it absolutely happens. But even if DJ isn't playing, you get smoked 3 times in a row here, you're probably done. If you win one, like, here's my thing, and this is what I've been cruising the Gators online message boards and looking at what people think. There's definitely a couple of camps. There's one camp that's absolutely get rid of him, he doesn't win. And there's another camp that says, look, this team is playing better. They play hard for him. They've gotten better on both lines of scrimmage as the year's gone on. Isn't that what you said he had to do? And so I understand where both are coming from. I tend to lean toward the you gotta win at some point group, because that's the job. That's why you get paid bajillions of dollars, to win. So you gotta win some of these. And if DJ can play, which he should not play if he's not fully healthy, but if he can play and they win, then I think that reframes the conversation. If they were to beat Texas or LSU or Ole Miss, or multiple of those, there's a legitimate conversation to be had. If they don't, I don't know if there is.
So your pathway to Billy coming back next year is 1-3 in those games, or 1-2 in those games?
I don't even know if it's that. I think you might have to win 2 of them. But you have to win. Like, as a lot of the Florida fans have said, this camp, that I'll call them the no moral victories camp. And they're right. Moral victories aren't good enough at the University of Florida. You have to be winning. The job is to win.
Yeah. And the thing that's so crazy to me is that Florida had a legitimate chance, like a real life probably should have won the Tennessee game. And I feel like if they would have gotten that one, and everything else about the season stayed the same, including how they played against Georgia, all those things, I think that this would be potentially an entirely different discussion, which shows you what the margin of error is when it comes to sentiment, right? Like, do you agree with that? Like, if they would have found a way to beat Tennessee, do you think that we would have a different thought of what needs to occur in the final month of this season for him to stay?
Especially given with what happened against Georgia? Yeah, I think we would. And remember what I said the night of the Tennessee game, after that game. I said, this is worse for Billy Napier than if he'd lost by 50, because they did have a chance to win. And the reasons they lost were his coaching decisions. Running a jet sweep on 4th and inches when you have a 240-pound quarterback. Not going for 2 at the end when you have the less talented team and you need to shorten the game. Like, those are his decisions. Those are his fault. So,
Andy, if LSU beats Alabama on Saturday, Florida will have played in a row Georgia, Texas, LSU, and Ole Miss, all of whom have their and Ole Miss. If Ole Miss wins on Saturday, that's 4 playoff teams potentially in a row. And then
Correct.
2 weeks previously, you had to go on the road and play in Knoxville. Like that, I don't know that I have ever seen a harder schedule before.
Nope.
Have
and
you?
we said that going into the year that it was going to be that.
Any year.
Yep. Said that going into the year. So again, if you can win some of these, there's a conversation to be had. I think you got to win.
There's a third camp too that you didn't mention in there.
Okay.
And this is the camp that I'm in.
All right.
Billy is a wonderful guy. By all accounts, people seem to love him. He'd probably be a great representative of the University of Florida if he were to be successful and be the coach there for a long time. That said, there are 2 things that you need to do in this job, which is 1, win. But the other thing that leads to winning is recruiting. And he doesn't do that. Now, they've had nice classes that have fallen apart, but he hasn't done good enough in the acquisition of talent in the portal, and he hasn't done good enough in high school recruiting, especially considering the fact that Florida is a wide open state right now, and Mario Cristobal is showing, a few hours south.
What you can do if you do both well. Yes.
So to me, if you're not doing the recruiting and talent accumulation piece, then all you're doing is setting yourself up for reoccurrence of what occurred this year. And if we are talking about DJ Lagway's health, and we've been discussing a true freshman quarterback's fate as a direct link to whether or not he's going to be able to keep his job, that means you're over-reliant on one player. Your roster isn't good enough from top to bottom. And to me, that is the biggest offense of anything that you could even describe. Not almost beating Tennessee or losing, not losing to Miami the way that you did. The reason why this is happening is because of the failure that you did not equip your roster with enough good players. And that in the SEC, that at Florida, that anywhere else that expects to win at the level that Florida does is just not good enough. And I think we already have our answer for that, regardless of what happens in the next 3 weeks.
Well, that said, we're on a different era where you can just buy a bunch of players. So that part maybe fixable, but I agree with you because I said this going into the Georgia game. If your fate in year 3 is tied to one player, you're already screwed. Like
they're playing
hard. At the end of year 3, your fate should not be tied to one player.
They're playing hard. They're playing well under him, right?
Yep.
If you would have done the recruiting piece or the portal piece, imagine playing hard and playing close against these teams if they had 5 more elite level players on their team.
Well, they'd be winning.
They'd be winning a bunch of these games, and they might actually be in the playoff discussion. So, like, the moral victory people are probably right in this, and that it is very, like, and I think that he deserves credit for the team staying, like, locked in, right? Like, we've seen a lot of teams
absolutely
in Florida's situation just punt and lose all their games, or not seem to care, no emotion, all that stuff. Like, Florida plays with emotion. They are still bought into his message. And I think that like that piece is really important in a piece that we forget about. So he deserves a lot of credit for keeping his team bought into the mission. But this is just not a roster that you would anticipate would be Florida good. And you said people are asking you the entire offseason, is Florida going to be good? Are they going to be better? You live there, and you've covered teams that had Florida good players. And this team just does not have it. So whose fault is that?
No, they're playing hard, and they're playing. They've gone from playing kind of where I thought they were going to be to playing way above where I thought they'd play. But it's not like what Florida needs to do, and I don't know that the current Florida administration will allow this to happen because they're just not, it's not their style, but they need to push all in the way Ohio State and Ole Miss did and just go buy a really good roster to put around DJ Lagway. If you're going to keep the coach, which I think the athletic director, Scott Strickland, wants to do, because that is probably his best path to longevity. If you're going to keep the coach, then go buy him a roster. Like exactly what Ole Miss did, exactly what Ohio State did. Like use half of what you were going to pay because remember, if you fire Billy Napier, it's a $26 million buyout, $13 million due up front. Use half of that $13 million to supplement whatever you were doing in NIL. Rev share's coming. So come, next football season, that money's going to kick in, and buy a roster. Like, that's the other path. I just can't see Florida doing it. I'm going to have a column about that later on 3. That you probably read that tomorrow morning at On 3, because I'm going to explore all of those possibilities a little more, because I find it fascinating, Ari. I find it very, very interesting.
2025 Florida football schedule. Saturday, September 20th.
It's the same as this schedule, but reversed.
Yep. Miami in week 2, Georgia week 4, Florida State week 5, Tennessee week 6, Texas.
Georgia's
week
not
7.
week 4. I hear.
Whatever. It's the 4th game.
Georgia's Halloween weekend.
Okay. Yes. Then we have Tennessee, Texas, LSU, Ole Miss, and A&M all in a row. With a game with you against Kentucky in the middle there. Oh, it's up here. I'm looking at something else. I should have known that River.
Well, that's the 2024 schedule. But if you flip where they play the SEC games, then you have and the Miami game. Then you have the 2025 schedule.
But Florida State's also on there. What if Florida State?
And Florida State, right? And Florida State will be coming to Gainesville. Yeah. So, yep, it's going to be a very tough schedule again. It's going to be the same thing. So you have to decide, do you want the same thing, or can you get something different with the same guy, or do you need a new person to get something different? I'm telling you, the next few weeks are going to be really interesting. I think I'm going to go to that Florida LSU game, because I am fascinated by that entire situation.
I think the path to them being good next year is shorter by keeping him and buying up better players.
I know. That's why this is so interesting, because we keep looking at all this stuff through the old lens, and there's a new way to look at it now. And we have to consider the new ways.
And what's a better use of money? Because at least with a buyout, that's dead money.
Yeah, now you're paying the buyout again next year, but it's lower.
But I'm saying, as long as you're paying out a salary to a person who is working, and then you use the allocated funds that would have otherwise been dead money to improve the roster, he clearly has shown that he can get his team to play hard. He's proven that this year, right? You go get two or one explosive wide receivers. Their young running back on this team is incredible. He's going to be great if he's around next year.
Yeah, Jaden Ball.
He's awesome. Get a few really good defenders, and you have yourself a team that can compete. Now, the problem is that if you're making an investment, and I know we're spending a lot of time on this, but I think it's interesting.
It's interesting.
If you make an investment, you also want to look at the forecast of the maturation of that investment and see like rainbows and sunshine. And it's like the thing that Ole Miss did is very different, because Ole Miss invested all that money into a crappy schedule. Like if you invest all that money and you're much better, but you go 9 or 8-4 next year with the players that you get, is that money well spent?
Right. Like, and you could theoretically have a really good roster,
really good team, and go 8-4.
Still go 8-4 against that schedule. You're right. Ari, we're going to talk about Rhoback for a second, but when we finish with that, we're going to talk about a quarterback change potentially at a place where the guy usually does well with quarterbacks and is not doing well with quarterbacks. But first, let's talk about Rhoback. I, of course, am wearing my Rhoback Performance Tee, the long sleeve version. I love this shirt so much. I own 7 Rhoback Performance hoodies that are basically my favorite garments that I have relatives stealing pretty much constantly. But you've also got the polos, the quarter zips, the jogger. The new jogger material is so comfortable. If you're not wearing Rhoback, you are missing out. It is the most comfortable, versatile, just awesome athleisure that you can get. So if you'd like to get your collection started, use the code Andy and get 20% off your first order. That's Rhoback.com, RHOBACK.com, and load up, because this is perfect performance hoodie weather. This is long sleeve tee. This is perfect weather for that. This is the time. So use that code Andy, get 20% off your first order. Rhoback.com, RHOBACK.com. Ari, let us move from Florida all the way across the country to Los Angeles. Is USC going to make a quarterback change? So USCfootball.com reporting that Lincoln Riley may be going from Miller Moss to Jaden Mayava for the Nebraska game. Jaden Mayava, of course, is the guy who came in as a freshman at UNLV last year, got thrown in because their starter got hurt, and then wound up being the Mountain West Freshman of the Year. He was going to go to Georgia, and then at the last minute decided to go to USC. USC already has now lost 5 games. They just lost to Washington. They're going to give it a shot with the new QB.
Can I make an admission to you?
You may.
Maava and Pavia were the same person in my brain during the offseason.
They don't
like
look
I couldn't separate
alike.
the two.
One is
it's not about
so
look.
much taller than the other.
It's not about what they look like. Their names were the same. And they both came from smaller schools. And like I could not. Like when Vanderbilt got Pavia, I thought they got Maava. That said, there is upside here.
Well,
He was young and explosive. And whenever I think about this stuff, I always think about that question we got like in our first mailbag together back in On 3 when someone asked, is Miller Moss actually an upgrade from Caleb Williams? Like that was a real question that we addressed on this show.
It was because he sliced and diced LSU a little bit, Miller Moss did, but since then it's not been great.
The thing that I am on high alert for here, Andy, is what if USC's offense just is so awesome now with the element?
Or they're going to feel really bad.
I'm going to feel really bad.
You're personally going to feel very bad because Lincoln Riley chose the wrong quarterback?
If Lincoln Riley chose the wrong quarterback, he could have indirectly cost me $1,000. Not indirectly, directly.
That's true. That's true. Now, I would argue that like USC's offensive line has actually been pretty good at run blocking of late, and their backs are like we are a Woody Marks podcast, so they could just run the ball some, and I think that they might or stick to the run, don't abandon it when they panic. But I'm interested to see what this looks like. And hey, Nebraska's kind of in a blender right now too, so this is desperation. Where like somebody's got to win some games to get bowl eligible here.
Yeah. We also have a comment from Goat Dog here that says any player in the SEC with the first or last name Emory is Emory Jones to me. And that is also true for me. That is also true for me.
Oh, that's funny.
There's a lot of similar names. You got to admit, like, do you think that like you can understand how
definitely.
I got the mix up?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so my son this morning gets up and he's a Bucs fan and he's mad because the Chiefs beat the Bucs in overtime. And once again, Juwan Taylor did not get called for false start when he's pass setting. Like he's off the line way before the snap, nearly every play. And they missed it on a crucial play last night. And he's like, Juwan Jennings starting too early on his pass set. And I'm like, Juwan Jennings is a receiver. He's not pass setting. He's like, oh yeah, Juwan Taylor. Sorry. He's like, all these names are too similar.
Yeah. By the way, Bucs, I thought played a very good football game despite not having a receiver healthy. And also, the Bucs have Rakim Jarrett on their team. And I was obsessed with Rakim Jarrett when he was at Maryland. So like in my head, I was like, this is actually going to go okay. Because like in my head, if somebody is a stud recruit who then turns out
they're
to be
a 5-star, they're always a 5-star?
If they're a 5-star in high school, in my head, well, first of all, Rakim Jarrett was pretty awesome in college too. Like he was good. Plays.
Yeah.
Like, I thought that like, and he's also like 6'5", isn't he? He's a monster.
Yeah.
I thought last night was going to be Rakim Jarrett's coming out party. Like I thought it was going to be like, everybody's going to know who this is now. And the Bucs played really well. So well to keep his head up. It's going to be okay. I actually thought that Baker Mayfield was awful. And it's turned out that he's really good. And that's another piece of the Ari Wasserman can't analyze NFL quarterback chronicles.
I think a lot of NFL GMs gave up on Baker Mayfield too. So I don't think you should feel terribly bad about that one.
Yeah, I guess it's just like the Browns were involved. So that's probably the problem. I think we should just use that as our North Star moving forward.
Exactly.
Okay, we got some questions, Andy, or what? We're half hour into this thing.
We have 10 questions for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee. But before that, we got to talk about PrizePicks. The best daily fantasy game in America. Play $5, get $50 instantly. Use that code STAPLES. I tried to go all demon this weekend. The demon squares are the tougher squares to get, but I had a good feeling about who was going to score a touchdown and win. I tried to go all demons this weekend. Nico didn't run one in for Tennessee. That killed me. I was close. Dylan Sampson scored 2. I was happy with that. Lenore Sellers scored a rushing touchdown. I was happy with that. But I thought against Kentucky, there would just be so many Tennessee touchdowns that one of them would have to be Nico running one in. And it turned out Kentucky's defense played really well. And so it happens. But they're starting to populate.
I think that's a handsome card, though. That's a handsome card. You did good.
I think it is too. I think it had a good chance. And that's one of those, like, it was $25 to win $275. So sometimes you gotta put yourself out there a little bit. But I also put out a $5 5-part play, and I'll do that again this week. So if you use that code Staples when you first download the app, first sign up, you get $50 to play instantly. So you can do a $5 card, that $5 to win 50. You get that 50 instant bucks. You could play 10 more of those cards and have some fun. The board is starting to be populated for college football this week. Obviously, Maction starts tonight, and there's Maction Tuesday, Wednesday night. And then you got games Thursday, Friday. That Friday, Iowa UCLA game, little treat, little appetizer for everybody. So download PrizePicks. Use that code Staples. Play 5. Get 50 instantly. All right, Ari. Let us ask some questions of the College Football Playoff Committee. And this one's your baby. So I want you to kick it off with our first question to the committee.
Yeah, well, it was my baby, but you were the OBGYN that helped birth it. Like we worked on this together. I don't know if that's a good analogy or not.
There's a Photoshop in here that I really don't ever want to see.
Yeah,
with me as the OBGYN and you as the mom.
There's a woman on the stirrups, and I'm the doctor with the hairnet.
No. You're the person on the stirrups. It's your face. It's the Arnold Schwarzenegger, Danny DeVito movie Junior.
Yeah, and then what comes out is just the playoff bracket, and then you're
I'm just playing catcher.
Yeah, so 10 pertinent questions that I think we're going to find some things out about tonight, right? So we have to figure out what the committee thinks. Like, as you and I have been going through this season, both of us do a bracketology like exercise every weekend. You do bracketology, I do bubble watch. That also includes a bracket. And we have notions of who we think are going to get in and who we don't think has the inside track based on the way that we have come to understand the committee operates, right? And my anticipation is that the committee will operate in the same exact way in which it always has. So that shouldn't change. But what does change is actually getting bona fide, real, solid information of what the people who are deciding the bracket will think of the teams that we are judging every week. And where they're ranked right now on Tuesday night, though not, you could say it doesn't matter, gives us an inside look at what they could end up being and who's more dangerous, who's less dangerous than we think, right? So the first question that we have, and I don't know if they're in any particular order in terms of pertinence, but we're just going to go through them. Will there be a 2-loss team, Alabama, in the top 12 already? Like, we are going into the season thinking that Alabama, if they win, or going into the weekend, Alabama is probably a win over LSU away from being comfortably in, right?
Right.
But they don't
have that win yet.
They don't have that win yet. That said, Alabama does have a win over Georgia, and what do we know beyond the shadow of a doubt about the committee? It's that they value more than anything beating really good teams. So they have the most valuable win in the country right now. Are they going to be like number 7, like right out of the gate? Like, or do you think that Alabama, who has faded out of the playoff discussion for a large part of it after losing to Tennessee, is going to be back down a little bit further? Like, what do you do with Alabama here? Like, if you were putting together your rankings projection?
Yeah. Now remember, they're not projecting what they think is going to happen by the end of the season. They're just going on the results that have already happened. So I would think Alabama's a little bit lower because of that. But I will say the committee, much more than the voters, the AP poll voters and the coaches poll voters, the committee tends to act more like line makers. They tend to act more like people who rely on power rankings. And if you're relying on power rankings, then Alabama's going to be very high. They're going to be higher than you probably think they should be.
Is it possible that Alabama is ranked ahead of a team like Penn State, for instance?
I could see that because they would say that Alabama has a better. All right. Penn State's best win is Illinois, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Alabama's best win is Georgia.
Right.
So,
like,
but Alabama
I think
lost to Vanderbilt.
If I had to guess, I would probably think that Alabama would be in the 10 to 12 range tonight. But would anybody be truly shocked if Alabama was ranked number 6? Like,
no.
Would you be shocked by that? Like, what if Alabama is ranked ahead of Notre Dame?
I could see that because the Georgia win is probably considered better than the Texas A&M win.
I don't know that you could put them in front of Tennessee, but they
exactly
lost
where are you putting Tennessee if you put Alabama there? Because Tennessee's beaten Alabama and only has one loss.
But teams that Alabama will probably be ranked ahead of or could be ranked ahead of include SMU, Boise State, Penn State, and Notre Dame. So if you take those teams that we all kind of think are going to be in the top 10, like you could find Indiana like coming in at number 5, right? But you also could also envision a world where Alabama is ranked in or around or ahead of Texas because they have 2 losses, but that Georgia win's going to carry a lot of weight. And both play Georgia. Yeah.
I'm fascinated. I really am because I feel like this, even though we've seen them do this for the 14 playoff, I'm curious if they're different now. But I had a question here. Let's bring up our blind resume question, producer River. Is one of these teams 5 spots better than the other? Because that's what the AP poll thinks. Team A is 8-0. Its combined opponent record is 34-38. Its Sagarin strength of schedule rank is 41. Its record versus the Sagarin top 30 is 2-0. And its combined scoring margin is plus 124. Team B is 9-0. Combined opponent record is 38-38. Sagarin strength of schedule rank is 54. Record versus Sagarin top 30 is 3-0. And the combined scoring margin is plus 224. And folks in the chat, do we have any guesses as to who is Team A and who is Team B? So Nick Terry says, is that BYU and Indiana? So he's saying, is BYU Team A and Indiana Team B? No. You got one of them right. Team A is BYU. Team B is Miami. I'm not saying BYU needs to be ranked ahead of Miami. What I'm saying is, are they 5 spots apart? Because that's what the AP poll has them. I suspect, Ari, that these two are going to be closer together in the committee ranking.
Yeah, the thing is that we have gotten to a place where losses have felt like the end of the world because that's the way that college football has been built for decades. Losses still really hurt you, which makes me feel like, going back to the previous question, that Alabama should probably be in the 10 to 12 range. And I think it's possible that Miami and BYU are directly next to each other in the top 5, right? Like Indiana, Miami, and BYU will probably be all in the top 6, right? Like, isn't that kind of how it's supposed to go if you're undefeated?
I don't know. I mean, the thing I think is interesting about the committee, and they kicked us off the first ranking, the first one they ever did. Remember back in 2014, the time Mississippi State was ranked number 1 in the first ranking? Remember Florida State was undefeated, was the defending national champ, and was number 1 in both polls. But Florida State had not looked good getting there. And the committee didn't bite and rank Florida State number 1. And it kind of changed how the polls ranked them the rest of the way. So how do they deviate? Because I don't think the 0 next to the 0 in your loss column means as much to the committee as it does to poll voters.
Well, I'm going to tell everybody this, and I'm going to let out a little dirty secret. And now that our buddy Ralph Russo works at The Athletic, I feel a little bit better about it. Okay. AP poll voters are lazy and not engaged. Okay? I was an AP poll voter before. Most of them are beat writers who spend their entire day...
You were just eating pizza the entire day on Sunday instead.
Yeah, they had post-game pie on Saturday. I was laying on my back on Sundays, but I remember don't you have to like get the poll in like first thing in the morning on Sunday? Like it was the last thing
It
I
has to
did
be
every
in by
Saturday
like
night when I
6
was
a.m.
voting.
Sunday morning. Yeah.
So like I had to do it on Saturday, and a lot of times when you're doing it, imagine covering a night game and then having to do the poll after. What do? You go and you look at the way that the committee did it before, and then you use those rankings and you look at the scoreboard and you do your best. But like the fact is that like we use the AP poll as some sort of metric or North Star for how we're supposed to view these teams. But the fact of the matter is that the committee's rankings are the only rankings that we actually get outside of maybe the ones that we do, which are meaningless because they spend all freaking week only thinking about the rankings, watching the teams in the sense of how they're going to rank them, and they use a deep dive of stats in order to arrive at their conclusion. So who do you trust more? The AP poll, who will look at BYU and go, well, they're not very good because they're BYU. I didn't expect them to be good. And they don't play in a power conference. So I'm going to put them at 8. But Miami's in the ACC, which we're supposed to pretend is a really good conference because it's a power conference, put them at 4. Like that is not how they operate in that room. And both of us have done the mock committee exercise, right? You've done it, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's really great and crazy to see the depth of resources that they are given in that room. Like they aren't just like, here, I'm going to put, like, they are looking at, like, they know what your stats are on turf versus grass. Like, I mean, they have every identifiable metric that you can judge a team by, and they display it on a board. And they're coming from I think they do a really good job, Andy. Like, I really do.
I do too. And I know people want to believe that they care about conference and all that. I don't. I don't think they do. Ari, what is your next question?
The next question is what matters more, which we've kind of covered, but we should cover again. Good wins or terrible losses?
I think the committee has historically told us it's good wins a lot more than terrible. And this is the Notre Dame question. We just call this the Notre Dame question. Like Notre Dame has a good win against Texas A&M and the worst loss against Northern Illinois. Can we agree that Notre Dame losing to Northern Illinois is the worst loss that any playoff contender has?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, let me ask you this question just as a sub question, because I've always wondered this. Do you think losing to a lower level team by 1 is worse than getting your ass kicked by a good team?
Yes.
Like, what do you think? What do you think we learn more from? Like Notre Dame losing to NIU in a sleepy, terrible game that they probably wouldn't lose if they played on Saturday, or a team like, do we learn more about Notre Dame losing to NIU or Texas getting its doors blown off by Georgia? Like, which one do you think was more revelatory?
We learn a lot about both
information?
teams. I think we learn a lot about both teams that way. And it's one thing if like NIU is the best team in the MAC, that's different. But NIU is not the best team in the MAC. NIU is 4-4 right now. Like they followed up beating Notre Dame by losing to Buffalo. They lost to NC State. They've lost to Toledo, and they lost to Ball State. Now those are close games, but they're still 4-4.
Yeah.
And they're a MAC team.
Here's how I kind of view it, and I might just be wrong, but I like talking through this stuff.
Yeah.
Like having covered the sport for, a combined 35 years, Andy, you know that there are teams that show up on Saturday and just aren't in it, right? They're not ready to play. They think they're going to beat the crap out of the team they're playing. They don't take it seriously. They're not prepping right. They sleepwalk through 4 quarters. They have turnovers. They just play a really bad game out of lack of focus and lose. But to me, while you should be penalized for it, and in the past era, losing that game probably does go a long way in disqualifying you from the field, I don't know that it's an indication that on your best day, you can't compete at a high level with a really good team. That said, in a Georgia Clemson situation or a Georgia Texas situation, when both teams have been taking it seriously all week, you're at home, you're geared up, going into it, it's going to be a litmus test for how good of a team you are, and you get your ass kicked. That to me is more telling that is susceptible to happening again when you play a good team than losing to a bad one that you just didn't care about.
Right.
And I don't know if that's a
more of a
flawed
simulation
thinking.
of an actual playoff game.
Right. You're getting closer to looking exactly at what you're going to have to face in an indoor dome in January in the Texas-Georgia game than you are in some sleepy Saturday in South Bend. Then I'm not trying to be a Notre Dame apologist here. I think that they should be penalized for that. That was embarrassing and a terrible loss. But I don't know if that loss itself is enough for me to be like Notre Dame can't compete at a high level. And I don't think the same thing for Texas too, but the Texas game was more, I would say, alarming to me because there's way less of an excuse for that than there is for, yeah, we just didn't take it seriously.
Well, the other thing you can consider more in a 12-team field is how a team improves over the year. And I think Notre Dame has certainly improved over the year.
And like, what would the spread if Notre Dame played Northern Illinois tomorrow be? Like Notre Dame minus 25 again? Like, but
probably,
if they play,
Yep.
But what if Texas played Georgia again? You think Texas would be favored this time? I don't.
They would not.
What changed?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's just like a good thought exercise because it's like,
oh, it is
bad.
It's
and that's
great.
why bad losses don't disqualify you in the committee's mind, because I think that they're rational enough to know that bad Saturdays happen. And in this new system, those are forgiven very easily. Now, the problem with Notre Dame specifically is that they don't have any great wins as of right now to counteract that terrible loss. If you look at their schedule right now, the one win that they had that was supposed to be carrying the weight for them was Navy, and the Navy turned around and lost again on Saturday. Like, that's not,
they lost to Rice, and then A&M lost to South Carolina. So
and A&M lost. So like, and that win will probably carry them quite a bit, especially if A&M ends up beating Texas at the end of the year. But like, my view of Notre Dame, and there's proof in the episodes of this show, was very much not changed after the NIU game. Like, I came back the following week and said they're probably still going to make the playoff, and I have been like riding with Notre Dame since then.
I think you may be right, unless Lincoln Riley got it right with Jay and Maava, and all of a sudden USC's a wagon.
Which, by the way, you laughed. That could happen. That said,
I'm laughing. Like, I'm serious.
My view of Texas, walking out of that Oklahoma game that you and I went to in Dallas, and what I think of Texas now has completely shifted.
Because of
I don't know if that's
game.
Fair. Yeah. But it wasn't just one game. It was getting your ass kicked by an actually good team that may not actually be the juggernaut that we think they are. Like, that
and we
to me
won't
is
see
scary.
And we won't see Texas against that again until they go to Kyle Field on the last day of the regular season. So we will find out more then.
Yes.
We got to talk about, we were talking about wagons. We got to talk about one of the ultimate wagons. But first, let's talk about JLAB. JLAB is gearing up for college football with some of the top talent in the game, from Travis Hunter to Ohio State's Will Howard and Quinshon Judkins. These football stars embody JLAB's core values of innovation, performance, and excellence. Just as JLAB pushes the boundaries of audio tech, these athletes redefine their sport with skill and dedication. Whether you're traveling to watch your favorite team or streaming the game on your mobile device, JLAB has you covered with every kind of headphone you could want. Find that blue box at retailers near you or visit jlab.com. Ari, I'm going to let you take this one, since this is one of your questions. This is one of your
yes. What does the committee think of Indiana? Now, we know that the committee, with their statistics and their research and the fact that they watch all the games, which, by the way, AP poll.
I just got that Cranberry song in my head. And their statistics and their metrics and their tanks and their bombs and their guns.
Never heard that before in my life. Yeah, I know.
You've never heard Zombie by the Cranberries?
I don't know. Maybe
You're a 90s baby.
I might have heard that, but the way that you just presented it wasn't a very good like sample size.
And
for
their
me
tanks and their bombs and their guns, they are they're still dying. You don't know that song? What is wrong with you?
My entire life. Yeah, your impression of Paul Feinbaum was better than this. I don't know what that was.
I'm sorry that I can't sing like Irish person Dolores O'Riordan. May she rest in peace. In your head.
I would play it on the show just to see if I've heard it, because one of my weaknesses in life, and you know this about me, Andy, is that like I don't know any celebrity names, and I also like have no like name recognition when it comes to these types of things. So like if it was on the radio, I'd be like, oh yeah, I've heard the song a million times, but like I have no ability whatsoever to like recollect it right now.
Well, we can't play it or we'll get a copyright strike. I can sing it, but that's about the best we can do. So let us move on.
We're
to
nowhere
Coach
near.
Siggs.
We're nowhere near invading their copyright with whatever that was. Okay. What does the committee think of Indiana? I think that the entire country was really late to the party. I was late to the party, right? Like after week 4, I was still like, yeah, they wouldn't be able to beat LSU. And like that was very wrong. But they still have that IU logo on their helmet, and they still don't have a very tough schedule. So being undefeated and blowing everybody out is a super impressive thing. And I truthfully believe that when they play at Ohio State, if they get through this Michigan game on Saturday, in which they're a 14 and a half point favorite, that they will probably be a 10-point dog. But that's really good. Like, I think that's an indication of a really good team. What is the committee going to think of Indiana and where they put them right now on Tuesday night?
All right, let's play Guess the Ranking.
Okay.
Let's play Guess the Ranking. I think Indiana will be ranked. Okay. They're going to have Oregon.
They're going to be ranked behind teams that are going to anger Indiana fans. Like
they're going to have Oregon first. Like we know that. But then it's probably going to be
Ohio State will be 2, I guarantee it.
You think so? Okay. Not Georgia. Yep. Okay. Well, I think Georgia will be 3 if Ohio State's 2. And then 4. Okay. Miami. I bet Miami's above Indiana. I think Indiana will be 5 or 6. Yeah. And if they're 6, they're going to be behind Texas.
I think that Indiana is going to be like 8.
Ooh, okay.
I think Indiana is going to be ranked behind Texas. I think they're going to be ranked behind Notre Dame potentially. I think they're going to be ranked behind BYU. And did I say Texas already? I think they're going to be behind Texas. And
you think they'll be behind BYU? Okay. Well,
I do, yeah.
BYU is undefeated and has the SMU win, which is really good. BYU's K-State win still looks really good, even though K-State's lost another game.
BYU has I think you could make the case that BYU has the best resume of the unbeatens outside of Oregon. Right?
I think that's fair.
I mean, beating SMU
Miami's
State,
got the Virginia Tech game and the Cal game that's sort of like, are we sure about this?
And the Florida game does no carrying of weight for them. So
they're 4-4. Yeah.
But it's a nice helmet game. But as you guys have to know, the committee doesn't pay attention to helmets. They look at data. Like they're not swayed by human emotion in the same way that we are. Now they might at the end of the road, but like, I don't know that Miami's going to be helped because they're like, yeah, well, Florida is actually playing really good football, right? Like, I don't think that does anything. But I think
they also weren't playing this way when they played Miami, which is another thing to consider. Again, we talked about what's it look like as you go on through the season. Different.
So the question's going to be, and Notre Dame is going to pop up a lot in these discussions, but what's going to matter more to the committee? Is the committee going to think that Indiana's unbeaten and beating everybody by 14 or more points is more impressive? Or are they going to think that Notre Dame's win over A&M is more worthy of a higher ranking? Like, I think we're going to get an idea of like, we've talked about this, and I don't know if it's even going to present itself, but if Indiana loses to Ohio State by 10 points on the road in a very good game, and they finish the season at 11-1 and are not in the Big Ten championship as a result of it, we're going to find out tonight whether or not Indiana fans have to sweat. Like, if Indiana's like number 9 or 8 in the poll tonight, then I think that's a bad sign for them.
Then
like,
they may be sweating against a 2-loss SEC team.
If you don't want Indiana to be sweating at the end of the year against a 2-loss SEC team, they might be directly compared to other teams. And like at the end of the road, like SMU has a better, I got to go look at SMU's resume. But if they run the table and they lose to Miami in the ACC championship game, SMU's win over Pitt may be more impressive than anything that Indiana did, right? Like that,
right. And
they might be in danger.
How Louisville finishes will matter too. Like if Louisville wins out and they're 9-3 with losses to Notre Dame, SMU, and Line, Louisville's other losses to somebody good. So
Louisville lost to Notre Dame. Is that what you said?
I said Notre Dame, SMU, and who else?
Miami.
They lost to another good team. Miami. That's it. Okay. Yes. So if they were to win out, that 9-3 looks good. That looks like a really high quality win for SMU. Also a high quality win for Miami too, by the way.
By the way, I spent all
Notre
day
Dame
on Sunday thinking that SMU was out if they don't win the ACC, and like now I'm questioning that.
Well, I'm glad you're questioning that because that's the next question.
So, like, to me here, if you look at the projections or think of the projections of where teams are ranked, like if SMU and Indiana are near each other in tonight's poll, then you're going to have a freaking dead heat at the end of the year. Like, and maybe margin of loss to good teams. I'm going to have here. You want a hot take? You want to clip this? I'm afraid to do it.
Do it.
But I'm going to do it. I think that SMU has a better chance of beating Miami than Indiana does of winning at Ohio State.
I don't think that's an unfair take. I think people, SMU Miami would be a track meet, and it really might come down to if somebody throws into coverage, whether that's Kevin Jennings or Cam Ward, and there's a pick that's a kind of a service break situation. I don't think that's a hot take at all.
Like, I don't think that Miami is a guaranteed ACC champ right now. Like, I think that SMU's chances of winning their conference are higher than Indiana's. And Indiana plays a tougher schedule from the standpoint that they would have to play Ohio State, and if they win that game, they'd have to play Oregon. Like, that route is so much, like, that's not even a slight at Indiana. That's just the fact. But playing at Ohio State is just more difficult, obviously, right? And playing Miami would happen on a neutral field, so that would help. And yeah, but anyway, like, what if the debate at the end of the year is 1-loss SMU versus 1-loss Indiana? I mean, and both of those teams lost to their conference champion. How do you do that? Indiana has a tougher schedule because playing in the Big Ten is tougher than playing in the ACC, but SMU would have sexier wins.
Right. And did Indiana's path through the Big Ten equal SMU's path through the ACC? Because SMU had to play Louisville and Pitt. So now Indiana can erase all of this by just beating Ohio. Like, what if Indiana lost to Michigan and beat Ohio State? Like, we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
That they're in. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
but then we'd be comparing Ohio State,
Indiana beating Ohio State, by the way.
Yeah, no, that's possible. When I said that SMU has a better chance of beating Miami, that wasn't to say that Indiana has no chance of beating Ohio State. Just to be clear.
Well, I am very curious. Okay, we played Guess the Ranking on Indiana.
Okay.
Shall we play Guess the Ranking on SMU?
Yeah, I think that SMU is probably going to find itself outside of the top 12. I think Indiana's going to be in it. I think SMU will be out of it.
So we think like 13, 14?
13, 14. I think Indiana will be like 7, 8, 9.
Okay. I cannot wait for tonight. I really want to see this now.
Which bodes very well for Indiana, because if that's the case, then Indiana, that they're probably telling you that Indiana would win that head-to-head discussion if they were both one. Well, because like here's the thing too, that SMU already lost.
They're probably going to have that head-to-head discussion. So the way it works is they kind of do it in blocks of threes. So I'll be curious to see if we see Indiana and SMU, if they're more than 3 apart, it means they didn't even really think that SMU was in the same discussion as Indiana.
Well, you know what? The thing is that I have to admit right now, and I'm sorry to tank the entire show, but Indiana would get in over SMU because SMU would have 2 losses in this scenario. Like, that's like, we have to discuss that. Like right. It wouldn't be 1 loss versus 1 loss. It would be 2 loss versus 1 loss. And I think that their loss to BYU could be to 2 conference champions, so that would make it tougher. Like if they lose to Miami and
column, but this is an interesting bonus question, and it's obviously not something the committee can answer tonight. Losses in conference championship games, do they or should they weigh the same as losses in the regular season? Because you earned your way to that game by winning.
Yeah, I'm with you. You have a second loss because you were good enough to play in a game that Indiana in that situation would not have played in. So, I still think that that's not how it works, because I think if you lose twice, you lose twice. But that would be interesting. Okay, do you want to go to the next question?
Yeah, let's go to the next question because this is another great one because we have not talked about anybody in the group of 5 yet, but somebody in the group of 5 is gonna make the playoff.
Yes.
So what will the committee think of Boise State?
Can we just tell them what's happening right now behind the scenes of the show? Because we have to. Cole Kubelik is roasting Andy for saying yesterday
he's
that
listening to yesterday's show.
I'm getting like all these dings in my head because I get text on my computer, which I have to figure out how to shut off, by the way. I'm like a boomer when it comes to that. I can't get my text to stop ringing. And he see is Andy, while I'm talking, arguing with Cole Kubelik about whether or not a Raptor is the peak of driving experience. By the way, we're this good at the show.
Cole sends me something that it looks like a Wells Fargo truck, essentially. He's like, why didn't you say this? And I was like, am I transporting large amounts of cash?
I think I would rather drive the Raptor than whatever that thing is that he just sent you. That's what are we doing here? You picking a Raptor over
Cole said Ari said any vehicle, and so I responded to Cole. Maybe I get a Shelby Raptor then.
You should also get you could just go like tank or like cruise ship. Like I said, any vehicle. It didn't have to be.
Well, I could have them modify, like make an F450 Raptor, and then donk it out even more.
He sent you something that they would have had at the beginning scene of the town. I don't know what that is, but okay. Number 6, Andy. What will the committee think of Boise State? They are a 1-loss team with a quality win over Washington State. Yes, I said Washington State and UNLV. And they had a last-second defeat on the road at Oregon, which by many people's accounts, everybody's account, is the number 1 team in the country. It also has one of the best players in college football in running back Ashton Genty. The Broncos are the clear favorite at the moment, Andy, to be the representative of the G5 in the playoff this year. But when we are discussing seeds and bracketology, a lot of times we see Boise like at the 12 just because they're in the G5. Like, is it possible that like Boise's just like number 6 tonight and they actually would rank them higher? And is there a way that Boise is a top 4 seed and one of the P4 conference champs is actually not in the top 4?
I think so. A lot's going to have to happen. Like you need absolute chaos in the Big 12 for that to happen. But if BYU's playing against BYU could be playing as a 2-loss team and lose in the Big 12 championship. So maybe that's their possibility right there. But I do think there's also the possibility that Boise State, if it were to win out, even if it's not ranked above one of the other conference champs, which would take it up to the 4, it still could be ranked ahead of an at-large team that gets in. So it could be 10 or 11, depending on how things go.
So if they're in the top 10 Tuesday, that would be a higher starting point for the thought of like the wheels turning, because the seeds won't correlate to the rankings because you would have to reflip them and get the top 4 in order. But if they think of you as a top 10, 9, 8 team right now and you keep winning, there's a high likelihood that you would be the G5 representative and could be like the 9 seed when it all if absolute chaos descends on the Big 12 and you have a 2 or more loss team playing as a 2 or more loss team in the championship game. Yeah. Like what if Colorado is like the Big 12 representative in the playoff as the 12 seed? Like that's possible, right? Like theoretically. Absolutely. 100%. Yeah. And or like Iowa State is not out of this thing yet. Texas Tech is not actually out of it yet either. That's like, so Texas Tech with that win against Iowa State, if they can beat Colorado, they'd still need help. They'd need somebody else to beat Kansas State, but they'd have a tiebreaker over Iowa State if they wind up with the same conference record. Should Texas Tech be alive in the 31 team list that I've got to break down right after we're done here? They're not on it. I think they should. If they win this week, they'd still only have 2 losses in the Big 12 and they'd have a tiebreaker over Iowa State. So they still need Iowa State to lose again. They'd have the tiebreaker over Colorado in that case. And it would come down to them in K-State, and I'm not sure how that tiebreaker works. Yeah, I think there's too much hoops to jump through there. Like, I think, like, technically they're probably not mathematically eliminated, but there are a lot of teams that aren't mathematically eliminated. We're talking about the playoff here. I don't know that they're going to make the playoff. So, I mean, I guess if they did, that would be the craziest thing that would happen.
It is still possible because look, Kansas State just lost to Houston, Ari. I am not out on the idea that Kansas State would lose 2 more. Because remember, if Texas Tech wins this one, they would still need Iowa State to lose 1 more in the conference. But they could lose. Iowa State could lose to Kansas this weekend.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, the Big 12 chaos could put Boise State at 4 if BYU doesn't hold serve.
Yep.
Whew.
Here we go.
Oh, boy.
Next question, Andy. Ready?
Yep.
Will they consider potential rematches when ranking teams?
We can handle this one quickly. No, they won't. And we've both done the mock selection. We actually do the bracketology every week. Like when I'm seeding the teams, I don't even think about who they're playing. And I guarantee you the committee's not thinking about it either. They're not worried about if there's a rematch. They're not worried about if it's 2 teams from the same conference playing in the first round. They don't care.
Yep. Your next question, Andy, here is how does the committee feel about blowout losses?
This only gets interesting if there's more chaos, I think. So there's 2 teams that are still theoretically in the hunt that are kind of the poster child for this, and that's Missouri and Illinois. So both of those are 2-loss teams. They're in the SEC and the Big Ten, respectively. Were they to win out, which is going to be challenging for either one of them, but were they to win out, would their blowout, because Missouri lost by a combined 65 points to Texas A&M and Alabama. They lost by 31 to A&M, 34 to Alabama. Illinois lost 38-9 to Oregon in a game where Oregon probably could have scored 70 if it wanted to. So if they get to 10-2, which means, and this means that there's been a lot of chaos in general, would they get dinged? Would they get left out because they were blown out? So I'll be curious about if they're ranked at all this week and where that would be.
Well, Illinois is out because they lost on Saturday, so they're not a part of this anymore.
Oh, you're right. I'm sorry. You're right.
Yeah, they're actually one of the few teams that there were 31 that we calculated last week that were still alive for the playoff, and I think the vast majority of them are still technically alive because the losses that occurred over the weekend happened to teams that were still either undefeated or 1-loss teams. So like a lot of teams are still alive, but Illinois is one of the few that dropped out. But you know what, Andy, the blowout losses don't only pertain to teams like, Mizzou. Like, what happens if Texas loses to A&M by a point and they're being compared? Does Texas getting blown out by Georgia matter, or did the scoreboard make it look less bad? Like,
I mean, yeah, I don't even know if you consider that a blowout. Georgia dominated the game, but Carson Beck throwing a bunch of picks in the game that kept Texas in it makes it look like, okay, Texas did have Texas caused those to happen. So I don't really consider that a blowout.
30-15. Yeah, I don't know. It felt like one. I don't know.
It did. It especially felt like one in the first half.
So then a sub question to this question would be: does the score have to be a blowout for the committee to view it as a blowout?
I think we're talking 3 touchdowns or more.
Okay.
So we don't have anybody like that other than Missouri, and Missouri has 2 full on got destroyed games. So
okay, one other one.
Where's that? Okay,
this is a grab ass one. Okay, but you got to bear with me.
Sure.
SMU loses a game. Clemson reasserts itself as the ACC champion, and then makes it to the ACC championship game. Not assert itself as the championship game representative, and then lose to Miami. If Clemson finds itself in a debate as a 3-loss team at the end of the year for the final spot, which is possible, with getting its ass kicked by Georgia,
they lose to South Carolina, but then they make the ACC championship,
right?
Or they lose.
They would lose in the ACC. They would lose to the ACC.
They'd be out.
They'd be
out.
Yeah, they would be out. But what if they're being compared to another team that has 3 losses because chaos can reign?
Yeah. Actually, let's get to that question because I asked that question.
Okay, go ahead. Go to the next one.
because there's one. I think there's only one team that can get them with 3 losses right now. I said, and my question was, are any 3-loss teams going to have a chance? There's one team. That team is Vanderbilt.
Okay.
So Vanderbilt's got the win against Alabama, which is great. They took Texas to the wire. Cool. They lost to Missouri in overtime. They lost to Georgia State, which is awful. That's like a Notre Dame NIU level loss. But here's what they would have to do to get to 9-3. They have to beat South Carolina, win at LSU, and beat Tennessee. If they were to do that, there's a possibility that they would have wins against 2 playoff teams there, maybe 3. Probably 2, though, because even if LSU were to beat Alabama, if Vanderbilt beats them, then Vanderbilt, I would assume, goes ahead of them because they'd both be 3-loss teams. But would that be something you consider? Because at that point, there's a good chance Alabama and Tennessee. Now, maybe Tennessee's not. Maybe Vandy hands Tennessee its 3rd loss. But Vandy would have some awfully good quality wins and probably at least one win against a playoff team.
I think I could take the trip with you there, but I'm not putting them in on the 31 now.
No, I don't think you should, because I think the chances of them winning their final 3 games are very
Florida.
slim.
I had Florida on it last week. So if I had Florida on it, do I have to put Vandy on it? Like, I don't know.
It's
like
the same.
It's the same idea.
Florida's resume would have been more impressive probably. And the Florida wouldn't have the Georgia State loss. Like, the Georgia State loss is, pardon the pun, the anchor holding Vandy down here.
With Florida, they would have, without question, been in. If Vandy did this, I don't know that it would be guaranteed. So, like that, I still think that even if they do the remarkable,
it wouldn't be.
It wouldn't be guaranteed, which probably would keep them off the list. But I do like where your head's at. Okay, last question, Andy. Ready?
Yep.
And this one was mine, and I don't have any specifics, but I think it's important. Here's the question: what does the bottom of the top 25 look like? And this is an important thing, because as we look at the rankings, we get very fixated on, why is Indiana 6 instead of 9? And why is Boise number 11 instead of 13? Whatever. But a lot of times, it's the bottom half of the poll that starts to matter a lot. And maybe not so much on November 5th, but on November 29th, it's going to matter a ton. You want to know why? Because if there are teams that have 4 losses or 3 losses or even 5 losses that creep into that bottom half of that poll, then that counts as top 25 wins on your resume, which will then in turn look like
which
good
the
wins.
Committee seems to care a lot about. Like, on their final ranking, that is the most common justification for why this team got in or why this team is ranked where it's ranked on the last day, is they had this many wins against teams in our top 25. Which 25 is an arbitrary number, but that's where they're setting the line.
But I'm going to be locked in on the bottom half of this tonight, because I think it's going to tell us a lot about who has quality wins next week as we're talking about this going into the weekend. So yeah, keep your eyes on not just the top half of the top 25, but also the bottom half, because it's going to tell a story. And at the end of the year, if there are inevitable debates, the teams that are ranked 20-25 are going to have a pretty important influence on the teams that may or may not get in.
Yeah, it's going to be great. A little bonus question. It's not a Dear Andy and Ari day, but this is a JC has a good question in the chat. If Army goes and beats Notre Dame, and then do they get ranked higher than Boise State? Yeah, I would think so. And I also think if Army goes undefeated, they would be in over Boise State. Now that's where you get that really interesting one of, is the Big 12 champ in at that point? Because it depends on who it is, and it depends on how many losses they have. So there's potential for a lot of chaos coming up.
Yeah.
A lot.
You know what I can't stop thinking about is, what if Boise would have just beaten Oregon? Would they be like number 1 right now?
They'd be in the top 5, I think.
Yeah. Anyway.
Oh, boy.
Well, they're going to get an extra dose of us today, Andy. They're going to get an extra dose of us.
If you're not tired of us yet, which I'm sure you're not, 7 p.m. Eastern time, right here on the On3 Sports YouTube channel, we'll be live as the playoff rankings are revealed. We'll talk about it. And, of course, we'll talk about it again tomorrow. Plus, tomorrow is a Wendy's Saucy Take Wednesday. It is my turn to deliver the sauce. Ari and I have not been saucy enough the past 2 weeks. It's time to get saucier. Let's go. We'll talk to you tomorrow.